Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the people, businesses, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I'm Trey Farkas, and on today's episode, my conversation with Gabbie Kelly, a former big city accountant who, after getting mistreated at work, left corporate America behind so she could help women repair their often fraught relationships with money. Gabbie will fill you in on that later, but let me fill you in on Gabbie. With a decade of experience in accounting and auditing at big firms in Portland, Boston, and Manchester, Gabbie has helped businesses of all sizes with their financial strategy. But in 2022, she left that behind. First, for a group she called WEM, short for We Empower Mompreneurs, and now as the Profit Mama, a business which made Gabbie one of Seacoast Catapult's 10 to Watch in 2024, an award she actually beat me out for. I'm not mad about it though, because this woman has lived a life far more boldly and bravely than I ever could. And I promise you that, even as tax day approaches, this is not a conversation about accounting. Instead, it's a very raw, emotional, and powerful conversation, and it's presented by our new sponsor, Kim Vargo. From her Brentwood home, Gabbie and I discuss how a rocky childhood led her to find comfort in the black and white world of accounting, the final straw that led her to quit corporate and go into business for herself, why she believes the quote, woo-woo is the key to fixing your relationship to money, and how she became the leader of New Hampshire's mob. Yes, you heard that right. But to begin this episode, we travel back to Gabbie's high school days when she was a high-achieving student athlete in Auburn, New Hampshire, where she also led a double life as the product of divorced parents.
It was hard. I'm going to get emotional. It was harder. I have a sister. My mom had a baby when I was 10, and she lived with my mom. And so I felt this guilt, like I was never there enough to be with my sister, but then I couldn't leave because I had so many sports responsibilities or my friends. And it was this living two lives, that I had my life in Auburn, in Manchester, and I always had to give up something to be somewhere else. So I couldn't go to practice, or couldn't be with my friends, or couldn't go to that party, or couldn't do this if I decided to go to my mom's. But it would happen that I wouldn't be there for months, and then I would be carrying around a lot of guilt of not being there for them and for her.
So I'm wondering, as you were weighing your career and you realized that math and numbers and accounting, you also realized the personal wealth you could get in that field, was there any part of it that was kind of like, I want to be able to provide for my family and make my own money and provide for my family so that my children one day, which you knew you wanted to be a mom, so that they don't have to kind of have this unstable life like I do?
Yeah. Well, I probably should say that growing up, both parents probably would say we have a long history of depression in our family, long history of alcoholism. And from 17, 18, I decided that I couldn't stay at my dad's house anymore. I didn't feel comfortable. It was my dad was getting worse in his alcoholism, and my stepmother wouldn't give me her financial information to apply for financial aid. And growing up, everybody would always say, my dad especially would say, knowledge is power. You got to go to college, right? That was the only path then to financial success or financial security. I think now people are much more aware of other ways to provide for themselves, but I knew I needed to go to college. And so I decided I needed to move out of my parents' house. I didn't tell them. I don't think I've ever really told the story to them, but I contacted my guidance counselor. I had a teacher who let me stash my stuff in her lab room because I was always playing sports. So I had a duffel bag all the time, and I would pack up my stuff and bring it to school, put it in the lab room, and as much as I could, I stashed it there. And then one holiday Monday, when my parents had to work, I had friends come over, packed up everything, stopped by the police station and said, I'm not a missing person. I'm 18. I'm deciding to leave. And I moved into a place in Manchester. And it was run by families in transition. So they placed me in a home. I had like a caseworker. And that was a time when I decided like, this has to happen in order for me to get what I want.
Wow.
That was a lot.
What was your family's reaction to you leaving?
My dad called me to make sure I was someplace safe and okay. I wasn't allowed back in the house. My younger brother still lived there, so I carried a lot of guilt for that for a while. But I think that most of my family knows I'm pretty headstrong. I can take care of myself. I have a great network. Always had friends, always had people. Even if it wasn't my closest family, I always had somebody I could rely on, even if I didn't feel like it for myself. It was like pretty quiet. There was no like hubbub. There was no fuss. Nobody begging me to come back. And so that's where like the rest of my life began.
So when you moved into this center at 18 in Manchester,
yes,
how were you getting by? What did your day-to-day life look like?
It was really interesting. At that time, I still didn't have my license. I didn't have a job. Those were like two criteria for moving in. So they kind of made an exception for me. The first thing I did was get my license. The second thing I did was get my first job, which is at the mall at Victoria's Secret. And the boyfriend I had at the time would help get me to and from. We would go to school together. He would help me get, or my friends get to work, because at that time I didn't have a car. You know, looking back, I think many people have like a reflection period where they're like, how did I know it would work? And it's just a wild thing to think about that I just moved somewhere. I had no car, no job, no money, applied to college. And from that point on, it was President's Day in 2012 that I moved out of my parents' house and into this transitional living program. I was considered homeless when I was applying for college. It was me, like I had to make sure I was okay. So I was the one at the front of the class. I was not partying. And my husband reflects on it and how he would see me at the front of the class and think that I was this smarty, like goody two-shoe, never went out to party. And he says, even for himself, like, you never know what's going on with somebody. And, you know, the pressure I was carrying to make it all work.
You went to UNH.
I did.
To their famed business school.
I did.
Who they've produced several Seacoast Stories guests. So you joined this illustrious club.
Yes.
How the heck did you get into this school and afford this school without having, you said your stepmother refused to share financial information? Yeah.
It was the only way. Honestly, if I didn't have like my household financial information to apply to school, living at my parents', it worked in my favor to be on my own and have no income and be considered homeless. And so I was able to access more grants, more federal student aid. If we back up, it was during this time where I was taking a class at high school. I was in this accounting class, and that's where there was chaos happening all around me. I was moving out. I was doing this. I was like trying to figure my life out and how to be an adult at 17. And I found accounting, and it was like the green ledger paper. It was the numbers, the balances, like the equations, everything had to work. Everything had an answer. Everything had order. And I was good at it. And it came a little easy to me. So for me, I was like, okay, this is a business skill. I can apply to the business school. Hope to God I get in. And everybody needs accounting. Like every business needs some sort of accountant. And I know that I will be okay if I pursue this. And so I was very serious about the path that that I was moving forward on.
What was your relationship like to your parents throughout school, a couple years removed from you leaving?
I always had a good relationship with my mom. I just had never lived there, and she was so far away that it was distant still. It was like, she cared for me. I'm like sending pictures or doing whatever. And then my relationship with my dad was probably pretty strained. And especially like a few years after I left, when my brother moved out, when he turned 18 and moved out to his own apartment, I think my dad, there was nothing there to keep him in check and his drinking. And so I would get calls like he was in the ICU. And so again, I had another layer of guilt, like I chose myself and couldn't take care of my brother or my dad. But I knew I couldn't, in order to be able, maybe I didn't know this at the time, but it was the only thing I could do was keep going. And, you can't change people, especially with addiction. I'm snotting all over the place. I'm sorry. Especially with addiction, you can't make the changes for them. And so he was going through his own journey. We have a great relationship now. He's met the kids. He comes over every once in a while, and I'm so thankful. At the time, it was really hard to be always wondering about what was going on at home or how my brother was doing. So I don't remember what the question was.
Do you need to get some tissues?
I do need to get some tissues. Hold on. I'm a crier. And at my wedding, I cried before the ceremony was even started, and I had snot running down my face. I just graduated this speaking program, and it was really emotional with the 30 other people in the cohort. And we had 60 seconds to do whatever we wanted to talk about, at the end. And I was like a blubbering mess. I walked on the stage and I was like, the thing I need you to know about me is I'm a snot-faced crier. That is, I own it now, and I used to hide it, and that's just who I am. So
well, that's okay. That means you are being you.
I'm being
me. And we love
me.
that.
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you graduated from UNH, master's degree in hand.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do with it?
I worked at a public accounting firm. I don't know when this plan came to be, but at some point I was like, all right, I'm going to get my master's. I'm going to get my CPA. I'll have a career. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids before I'm 30. This is Gabbie's life plan. I had no plan after 30, but I was like, I don't know when that plan. But like I said, oldest child, Capricorn, it was this is the plan. This is the checklist. I'm going to excel. I'm going to be the best at all of these. And I'm going to just check them off as I go.
And where did this plan come from? Did someone inspire you with this? Was this arbitrary? You made this up?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I was just shaking my head saying I don't know where it came from. However, my mom had my sister when she was 33. And my brother and I were born when she was 23 and 24. And so in my head, I was and probably most children, right? You're I'm not going to be like my parents. And so I was I want to be married before I have kids. And I want to do it as a woman. You go through your physical exams and stuff, and that there's a clock. And so when I was younger, I thought 33 was ancient. I was oh my God, what are you doing, Mom? But I picked a number, and I think I wanted to play by the rules. If that is not the most accounting.
Right.
And this plan was I'm not going to do things like my parents. I'm not going to drink or do drugs. I'm not going to party. I'm not going to have kids before I get married. I'm not going to not have a career that provides me financial security. And the list goes on and on. And with some wisdom and some life experience, looking back on all those things, my parents did the best they could with what they had. And so, they were my biggest teachers, along with my stepmother. And so now I can be very thankful for everything I learned and the ways in which they pushed me to where I am today, because I'm very grateful for the life I have.
So you achieved what you set out to do.
I freaking did.
What was was being a mother the last one that you completed on that checklist?
Yeah, sure was.
So when you were able to check that, how did it make you feel in the context of, using an example from my life? I had always had this idea that I wanted to publish a book around the age of 25. And then I did it. Ditto for producing a documentary. I produced a documentary at ESPN. And the thinking behind this, once I check these long, elusive things off the list, then I'll be happier. I'll have it more figured out. I'll be more confident in myself. It'll just be all sunshine and rainbows once I check these things off the list. So I'm wondering, for you had this idea in your mind that once I do all of these things, have all of these things in order, I've got it figured out. So I'm just wondering, when you did complete your list, did you feel like, all right, I'm good now?
Oh, no. I mean, that's never how it goes, right? And the irony is that I do a lot of public speaking about that very fact of happiness is not a chase, it's a choice. And I think that was also probably the start of that learning. But no, it's always on to the next thing, right? I had my first daughter and we were like, all right, when do we buy a house? This is obviously the next step. We start having kids, we buy a house, then we can get a dog, it was the checklist just keeps growing. And yes, I had my 2 kids by the time I was 30, but my life changed forever in amazing ways, but in ways I didn't expect, that first checkbox into motherhood.
How so?
Well, when I started my career in public accounting, I was a financial auditor. And the path for that is graduate with your master's, work 2 years, get your CPA, then move on to being a manager, then move on to being a partner, or you leave and you get a really fancy title somewhere else, like controller or VP of accounting or director of accounting or CFO eventually. And even for accounting, there's a path predetermined. These are the next check boxes that you have. And as soon as I entered motherhood, everything changed. I went back to work after my first maternity leave, and I thought that it would just be the same. My expectations going into having a baby and all of this were you just have a baby and then you go back to doing what you were doing before. And obviously it's going to be hard, but that's what you do. And then I entered this underground experience that I was wait a minute, every mother goes through this. It was so profound. Every person I know who's birthed a human has gone through this. And I went back to work during our busiest season, and they told me that if I didn't work 50 hours, which was the minimum during busy season, that they'd have to cut my pay. And I was absolutely fucking not. That's bullshit. What does my, employment contract say?
You actually said this.
I did not say words. Absolutely fucking not. But it was only 3 months later that I left, I think. And it's an interesting pattern that every time I had a baby, I left the position I was in. I was this is not for me. This isn't going to work. I'm not going to travel or pump in bathrooms and clients anymore. I'm not going to work on the weekends. And that's when we moved to New Hampshire. I left financial auditing. Our daughter was 9 months old, and we moved to New Hampshire.
Coming up, Gabbie's big problem with how women are treated in the workplace, and why she's determined to empower women who often feel powerless with money. But first, let's welcome our new sponsor, devout listener of the show, Kim Vargo. Kim offers a service I'd never heard of before, and I think it's something that all of us, including me, could benefit from. She helps you streamline your processes. And that's just boring corporate speak for. She helps eliminate all of the shit that you don't want to do with your job. Whether it's those administrative tasks like emails, payroll, or whatever takes you away from what you love doing most, Kim can find solutions for you. In a one-on-one session, she takes the time to hear your story, to understand your business, and then she'll find new workflows that fit perfectly into your busy schedule. To take you behind the scenes of this show, I'm stressed because I just lost my lone employee to a new job. Congratulations, Kate. I'm so happy for you. I love you. But I am not happy for me because now I have to figure out better ways to work so that I can still deliver high-quality episodes to you every Monday. But luckily, after a recent 30-minute Zoom call with Kim, I walked away with several actionable steps I can take today to save me hours of precious time. If you're also an overwhelmed service-based business owner, then I suggest you visit kimvargo.com/contact. In the message box, just tell her that Seacoast Stories sent you for a free call and a custom discount tailored to your business needs. You can also find this offer in the show notes. Thank you, Kim, for supporting the show, and thanks to all of you. Now back to today's story. In your conversations through the years with friends and women in your network and with the mompreneurs you now talk to on a daily basis, have you also found that this is the experience they have, that when they have a child, things change for them in the way they're treated in the workplace?
That and things change for them like internally, both. A lot of times the story is, I was doing this in my career, and then when I had a baby, I was told X, Y, and Z, or I felt like I was being held back in a certain capacity because I couldn't show up in the same ways. Like I had to show up the same as if my life hadn't fundamentally changed by bringing new life into this world. Or I didn't have support for postpartum. Like there was nothing available. I didn't have support for nursing. I didn't have support for the transition back to the workplace. And so I think for a lot of the women and moms that I work with, like this is probably true for any entrepreneur too, like a life event happens and then you're like, wait a minute, I need to do something about this. Or wait a minute, I need to create a life that better suits the life I want to live. And how do I do that? I'm going to build a business in order to like support me in that path.
Why aren't there those things in place? I mean, obviously, maybe this goes above your pay grade, but why is the corporate workplace not suited for mothers?
Feels like a loaded question. Well, if you look at, who's in charge of, Fortune 500 companies, who gets funding for startup businesses in our country, that's typically white men. And so I like to look at the good in people, but I also think that there's a history, right, of our using of others and like when people are in power, they want to stay in power. They're not just going to give it away. And so I think when women started getting more educated, it created a dynamic in family life that honestly, that added a lot to the juggle of motherhood because now we wanted to go back to work. We were highly educated in order to go back to work. And yet our like physicality, biology, like everything changes in your body. And so your brain is like, what the fuck? But I don't think corporate America isn't made for women and mothers because in our history of America, like women have always stayed home and mothers have always stayed home and business have been built and on the backs of others, even if they weren't moms, but it was moms taking care of the household, while their partners went to work. And so during COVID, I saw this huge wave of like mom support, which I think was really amazing. And I didn't see it a lot when I started having my children in like 2018. I don't like to get into the blame game, but I think that you're a history major, right?
Damn right.
I think that like looking back at our history and looking at the lessons and understanding patterns is really helpful for how we can change moving forward.
Very well said. And I'm sure a lot of the female listeners of the Seacoast will empathize with what you've said. I'm loving this conversation. There's so much more I want to get to. I do want to go back on your story a little bit. So as you were climbing the corporate ladder on your path to the CFO and the
world domination,
before you had children, what was your definition of professional success?
Yeah, it was financial security and titles and acknowledgement. Like, that was the only goal besides having like a healthy relationship, which I didn't have very many models for. And professional success was being paid well, saving for retirement, and being the best at what I did and being acknowledged for it.
You're such an athlete. I can tell.
Yes, athlete, Capricorn, whatever. But
same here. Let's go.
Yeah. Fun fact, my high school superlative was most athletic. So
wow.
The fact that you brought up athlete.
You peaked in high school.
I peaked, literally.
I won most involved in the community, even though I wanted best eyes.
That's,
kind of tracks.
I think
but I wanted best eyes.
Yeah, right? You're like disappointed. I still got an award. Success, I think, is a very tricky mental, emotional game for us in the US. I think we have a very big problem with adopting a definition of success that we don't even question, maybe ever, but at least until we're like halfway through our careers and we're like, wait a minute, I have given everything for what? Now I realize the checklist continues and it never ends. And so I think it's really important to question your current definition of success and potentially redefine it for yourself in order to, for the world, honestly, to be a happier place.
So what is your redefinition of success now?
My redefinition of success is living a life in alignment, which means that I'm able to spend my time, and choose how to spend it with my family, my friends, my work, my own hobbies and creative adventures, and to access gratitude along the way.
That is beautiful. And I would say you were very successful just based on the time that I spent with you. So you leave this firm from the North Shore.
Mm-hmm.
You and your husband moved to New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
And then what were you doing when you moved here?
Internal accounting.
Okay.
Accounting and finance. And everywhere I go, I meet amazing people and I create lifelong relationships. I am so grateful for every opportunity that I've ever had and opted into for that reason. And yet it was still misaligned. I was still bumping up against roadblocks that were just my values.
Like what?
Like, it's tricky because this was also COVID. And so things actually weren't too bad, except that I was dropping my daughter off at 6:45 so I could get my butt in the office in my seat at 7 so I could work until 5. And I, like everybody else, was still there, feeling guilty, racing to daycare to pick my daughter up by 5:30 to get home, have a half an hour of dinner with her, put her to bed, and like do it again. So I didn't realize like I was already in Groundhog Day working, because finance and accounting is this like, I'm sure there are other work areas like this, but it's such a grind, like taking lunches are a luxury and we perpetuate it. Like coming from public accounting, you're like, who takes lunches? Like there's no breaks. A lot of times I'd come home, we'd put our daughter down to bed, and then I'd open up my laptop again and be like chatting with the whole team at like 9, 10 p.m., just trying to get through stuff. We'd call Fridays Fire Drill Fridays every something always blew up Friday afternoon when you're trying to leave. So again, I found myself putting in 50 plus hours at some points during the month. And then, everything fell apart in COVID. Then we found ourselves with 2 kids, no daycare, playing hot potato during the day to get to meetings and watch our children. And then we would work at night from 8 to midnight and then get up at 5:30 and do it again. It was constantly a shit show. That's coming from me, who also is it's constantly a shit show, motherhood and taking care of kids and toddlers and, but I should have seen the writing on the wall. And no, it was just this is, okay, now I'm internal. I'm going to be a manager and then I'm going to be a director and look at that, CFO. And I was always do I want that responsibility? But that's the path, what else would it be?
So was there a moment or a turning point when you're living Groundhog Day in COVID, when you're perhaps in a reflective state? Was there any moments where you came to the realization, I don't want to do this anymore?
It was actually permission that my husband gave me. My youngest was 6 months old, and I had been stressed for months trying to nurse her. And if you're ever been a mom and trying to nurse your baby, you know that as soon as you're stressed about nursing, then you have less milk supply, and then you're even more stressed, and then you have less, and it's this downward spiral. And it was doing a lot mentally and emotionally. There was a point where I called my PCP and I was what? I don't know what's going on with me. I am tired all the time. I am crying all the time. I have this thing going on. I'm picking at my face. I can't stop. I'm watching myself in Zoom, because we're on Zoom. And she was well, at this point, I hadn't been on antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds for 10 years probably. And she was I think it's probably time. I think you need some more support. And right now, we with COVID going on, we don't know what's happening, right? And so I was talking with my husband, I'm not okay. And sure, I'll go on this medication to help me as a tool to be able to cope, but I'm not doing well. And I don't feel like I'm showing up for our kids, for him, for us, for me. And so I made the call shortly thereafter. I left to go do part-time CFO consulting. And that's when I started seeing the inside of actual entrepreneurship, and suddenly had this mentor who was my age, who had created this business and who wanted to be different in a world of finance and hustle. And I was oh, this is interesting. And I don't think it was necessarily right away I could do this, but what I started understanding was that I didn't want to work with VC startup tech bros. And they were great, and I have a lot of great relationships with them now. But for me, my nature is just about relationship building. The first 10 minutes of our calls are how was your day? What's going on with the kids? Oh my gosh, you have the flu? I had RSV, and I wanted to do that with other women and other moms.
How difficult was it for you to make this transition when something you had been dead set on years ago was, I want security and stability, and here you are diving into part-time, to entrepreneurship, which is a roller coaster. Some good days, some bad days. Sometimes you don't know when or where your next paycheck is coming from. So when you made this transition finally, how did you feel about it?
I had to confront a lot of my beliefs, limiting beliefs that I didn't realize were limiting myself. In business school, there's always an entrepreneurship class. And I was that's not for me. I don't have good ideas. Right? That's what, I can't go part-time. I have 2 kids and a mortgage. That's not for me. I don't have good ideas. That's not for me. I'm a type A accountant. I don't take risks. But starting your business is a required course in personal development. And so starting out, I didn't realize I was literally starting this right now 4-year journey of discovering who I am, what I'm capable of, and what I actually do believe.
So you decided that you wanted to work with other women
Yes.
as opposed to the VC tech bros. Why women and mompreneurs, which I had never heard that term. I don't know if you coined that, but I'm going to give you credit for that.
Thank you.
Why mompreneurs?
You don't have to give me credit. It's definitely been out there, but it's hard to find and Google. When I first started...
It's you because you have good ideas.
Thank you. Yes, of course. When I first started, we called ourselves... I had a business partner and we called ourselves WEM, like we empower mompreneurs. It didn't stick for whatever reason, but I wanted to have a place where I could get on calls and give to someone else what I wanted. The like, I care about you conversation. I know what's happening in your life and I know how hard it is.
And for anyone listening, just to interrupt, that's the best mindset to come in with starting a business. What is the thing that you yourself need?
Yeah.
Because that's what will keep you invested in the idea.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
Totally. But I didn't know that at the time. And so as it evolved, I started digging into the history of like, why are women afraid of money? Why don't we feel like we have the skills and tools? Why do we always feel like we're doing it wrong? Even starting this business, I knew I had to confront my own money stories and history. Like the lessons you give others, what you teach others is like also often what you need for yourself. And so, like I said, it was just like another class in my personal development course.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So WEM would then transition to Profit Mama, but you said something that really caught my attention. This is a conversation for all of the conversations that I've had on this show with other women and then just with women in my circle, never had a conversation about how they view money. You said women are often uncomfortable confronting their relationships with money.
Oh my God.
Why?
Looking back at the history, there's so many layers to our rights and ability to own assets, our voices being heard and accepted and made place for at the table, like our voting rights. It's not that long ago that we couldn't vote, that we couldn't own assets, everything. Like we were basically property of our husbands, they had to open a bank account. We couldn't. And it's always been like the partner, the husband as the provider, and we take care of the home. And lots of relationships I still see, like mostly my parents' age, women have zero insight, nothing, no understanding of the money in their household, what it takes, what their expenses are, how they're set up for retirement. It's devastating. And it doesn't work anymore. And yet, we've inherited all of these beliefs. One of the first questions I often ask in the talks I do, the workshops, the how-tos, panels, etc., is, what's your first memory of money? It could be like your parents fighting over it. It could be having been said, no, like we can't afford that, or starting a lemonade stand and figuring out how to make money on your own. But a lot of times it's just like money doesn't grow on trees, like lots of fighting about money. Money is often the number one reason for divorce, like it is a problem in most people's eyes. And also it's very taboo in our culture. Like we don't talk about salaries. We don't talk about how much you make. We don't it's this thing that defines sometimes like how successful you are, and it can put strains in relationships. Start talking about like, oh, well, they make more than me. And it's just like because we don't have a great relationship with it, because then we don't want to talk about it. But also like, then how do you get support if you feel like you don't know what to do? It's hard to go ask for help.
Right.
There's lots of shame and guilt, especially with women, about money.
Yeah, but it's a thing that dominates every decision of our life.
Literally, what do we do all day? We work to make money. And then what do? We spend money to get on convenience, like takeout. And we have somebody coming in once a month to help clean our house. We have people that mow our lawn. We spend money for convenience so we have more time to make more money. And it's like, hello, like, do we think that we're getting this backwards? Our whole lives are dominated by how much we can amass in wealth and how well we do that. And then like that defines where we are in the hierarchy of like how successful you are. And then you get to retirement and who knows, like, how's your health going to be? Do you make it to retirement? You know, like, are you stressed so much that you like have a heart, whatever the underlying factors of your health may be, the hustle culture does not help, right? And we are often under massive stress to perform, right? To exceed expectations, but like whose expectations and like whose definition of you're good enough or not. And so like, not only are women dealing with the past of like not being a human and not having a voice, but also our culture of like, this is the definition of success. So like, don't fuck up.
Wow. Very well said. Thank you for educating me there. So in your sessions, the Profit Mama, in your group sessions or one-on-ones, what are the conversations that you're having with these mompreneurs? What are the problems that they're coming to you with? Why are they seeking out your services?
Yeah. Well, on a very like high level term, a lot of business owners come to me because they had a year where they did well and then they got slapped with like a $40,000 tax bill. And they're like, what? I don't have $40,000 in my bank account. Like, what am I supposed to do about this? And then they like panic. Other times it's new business owners who are like, I don't want to do this wrong. So tell me how to do it right. Most people are afraid the IRS is going to come knocking on their door, which never, I could tell you, like in my history of working with hundreds of startups, business owners, and also like hundreds of bigger businesses in audit, like the IRS does not come knocking on your door. Like you are not that important to them. But we're terrified of doing the wrong thing. And then when we do the wrong thing and we get hit with a $40,000 tax bill that we either have to like take out a loan for, put on a credit card, you know, we don't want to tell people about it. And so my goal has been to create a place where we can do something about it. Not only can we figure it out and understand that it's like not necessarily our fault. Nobody teaches you how to manage money, not only in your personal life.
Which is so silly that we don't have those courses in school.
They're starting. But yeah, no, not like pervasive enough. So not only do we not know how to manage money in our own personal lives, but especially not in business. And then you start creating this like facade, like a behind the scenes is I'm freaking the fuck out about what I'm going to do next month to like pay my employees, or I just got this tax bill, like how am I going to pay it? And yet, you know, with Instagram or whatever, we just see businesses like doing well and like this business owner flourishing and being so successful. And we don't often see that like not many people are like feeling like they're on top of the world with their business finances.
So what do you do in your sessions to make these women feel more comfortable and develop better relationships with money?
Yeah. We first, you know, start with compassion about we haven't had the tools and resources. So like, it's not our fault and it's not your fault. What I like to say is like that term success, but like success and money, there's a formula. It's your money mindset times your money habits. And so a lot of times people come to me and they want to know like how to start a retirement plan for themselves, how to pay themselves from their business, how to know if they can afford an employee, how to save for taxes. And yet we're missing the other half of the equation, which is the mindset. If you're always afraid you're going to fuck up, you're going to make decisions out of fear and scarcity instead of abundance and knowing that you are like on the right path and you can't make a mistake. It's just like we learn the lessons along the way. And so we put so much pressure on ourselves to do the right thing the first time. We talk about those things in our calls. My biggest program is a group program, and I think it's really powerful for women. We see others going through this thing and we think, okay, well, they're going through it too. It's okay if I'm going through that. I can now ask the question, like, I realize this is safe. And so we talk about those things, like, how do we know what the right pricing is? Did you just look at somebody else's pricing? Well, how do you know what their money mindset is? Do they think that like they can't get anything more than X for, X? If you just use somebody else's pricing, you're like almost inheriting their beliefs about money. That's just one data point. Like if you look at the market pricing. Anyways, pricing is a huge thing that we talk about.
Yeah, that's actually something I would like to talk about. For any business owner listening, how do you determine what your worth is of your service? And obviously, like every industry has its own things, but just generally, because I know some people their guilt and that mindset might come in like, am I worth that much?
Right.
Who am I to ask for that?
Yeah, totally. Well, one, come see me and we'll talk about your custom personalized pricing plan. But what I like to start with is, what do you want your life to be like? Like first, what do you need to take home from your business? Like in your personal life, what do you need to be either paying yourself or contributing to your household income in order to be okay? Like we need to know the minimum you need to take home, because how I approach this is that we're building businesses to serve us. Yes, we want them to have an impact on the world, the community, make a difference. But if we are suffering and therefore our business busts, then like there goes that impact. So we need to make sure and rearrange like how we think about our businesses in the fact that the first priority is to serve us. And we need to understand like what that amount is. And then we can back into, okay, if we need to take home this amount, what does that mean we need to make per month? Okay, if we need to make that per month, what does that mean at our current pricing that we need to sell? Okay, whether it's a product or a service, is that doable? Is that reasonable? If not, do you need to charge more in order to make more, in order to take home more in the month? And to charge more, does that fit your current client? Right. So it's like this reverse engineering of pricing to then compare it to who are you serving? Like, what is the impact that you want to make? You could sell like earrings, for example. I've worked with people who custom hand make earrings and they sell them for like $30 a pair, right? And yet there are people out there selling custom handmade earrings for $300 a pair. The price, right? Like it's all made up. Honestly, with accounting, with money, like it is all made up. The point is how is it going to serve you? Who are the people you want to serve? And are you aligned with and comfortable with what that means for you? Like I talk about pricing and we talk about increasing prices, but then that person has to go out and sell the thing for that price. And if they don't think that they're worth it, if their beliefs don't match, then it's not going to work. Right? Like you're not going to feel comfortable. It's going to change your energy. You're not going to be like blasting it out on social media. And so we look at all of those data points. We might use like market prices as one piece of information, but not the whole answer, not the be all end all. We also want to look at what do you need from your business and how does your pricing like play into that?
And I know you speak about this a lot. You love the quote, woo-woo.
I do.
We love the woo-woo on this podcast. We love anytime we get to talk to the spiritual people. Mm. And this is not usually something you would find in the very everything is in order, makes sense world of finance and accounting. So why is the woo-woo something you are passionate about incorporating into someone's financial strategy?
It was hard for me at first. I will tell you, I was not very comfortable talking about the woo-woo at the very beginning. Like, I can tell you that. I think I wrote a blog about it, like how I used to, like view woo-woo in this right? In my like past life of accountant type A, like the rule follower. However, we are emotional beings, like the end. And our energy needs to match what we're trying to accomplish. For example, I had a client who's like, my husband isn't rooting for me. Like, I just feel like everybody's waiting for the shoe to drop on my business. Like, I've been in business 3 years. Like, I'm finally breaking even, but like, is this worth it? And so this was a really interesting moment also for me in my coaching career, because a lot of times we just always want to fix other people's problems. We want to give them the answer. And yet we don't have answers. Like, I can tell you, this is my pricing formula. You have to make the changes. You have to go sell the thing. I don't have your answers. I just have information. And I asked her, well, if it's not this, then what are you being called to do? Like, is there anything else that you're being pulled and like feeling motivated or feeling more aligned with who you are and what you're here to do? Because what I believe is that we have gifts to share with this world. And it doesn't matter if we're doing it in our own business. It doesn't matter if we're doing it through somebody else's business, whether we're volunteering. The point is that we recognize that we do have gifts to give. And I think that that's like one thing a lot of people don't see is like the point of their business is success. And yet really the point of their business is a way in which to share their gifts.
Wow. That is such a fun way to think about it.
Mm.
Now that you are 3 or 4 years into this journey of now being Gabbie the Profit Mama.
Yeah.
How fulfilling is this, what you're doing now as compared to the life that you were living before?
I'm a different person. It's hard to compare because I feel like it's not apples to apples. The way I was living before was the only way I knew. And I'm feel very grateful that all along the way, I've had people who believed in me, people who supported me. And it is profound, the fulfillment every day, even when the external like pressure of like, how successful are you? Like, what else are you doing? Are you on this board or that board? Or like, have you been in the New York Times yet? Have you been featured in like
Seacoast Catapult?
Cheers. Yeah. Our coffee cheers. It doesn't matter. Like you were like, oh my gosh, Seacoast, like Catapult top 10. And yet we don't always like take those in and say like, yes, I am. Because it's not about that. It's about like your inner worth. We can't like, our worth can't be defined by how much we achieve or who says we're good enough. And I believe we won't find fulfillment until we understand that and recognize that we can't fix it from the outside. We have to fix it from in the inside. And so, like I said before, business has been this required course in personal development. And I find that every year I'm more fulfilled because I am doing the work on myself. And that's where like the woo-woo comes in. It feels, even still, it feels like my little like critic is like, what the fuck are you saying? When I'm like, hey, the more you love yourself, the more money you'll make, right? Like, there's your answer. And I'm like, well, so many people out there who, hate themselves and probably make a shit ton of money, but how fulfilled are they? And like, how happy are they? And so it has been like a really wild ride of continuing to, like I said, work on myself and help others see that sometimes working on themselves, understanding their beliefs and habits and mindset is the most profound work that they can do for their business. So I think like where I am now versus where I was before, it's like the ignorance is bliss. I've always been grateful and amazed about what I've accomplished and like the relationship I've built, the friends that I have, the place that I live. And yet I know that I was always searching for more. And it still sneaks up, like you're not just done working on yourself. There's always more layers to the onion. And on most days, I'm like ready to like take the charge. I'm like holding the light and like, I'm like, everybody, like, don't you see, like your life is amazing already. And once we start recognizing that, then we can make decisions that are not based in fear. And like, how beautiful can that be? Like, how much more impact can we have? And how much more safe maybe we might feel, not feeling like we have to second guess everything that we do or like prove to somebody else. I use the term happiness a lot, but what I really mean is wholeness. There's a sociologist, psychologist. His name is Martin Seligman. He has written a bunch of books about like abundance, and he's a positive psychologist. He has this book called Flourish, and he writes like, it's not really happiness that we're searching for. And I say wholeness. He uses flourishing, which I love because it feels like it's in action. Like I'm not doing well, I'm flourishing. Even when things are hard, even when I'm going through challenges, even when, 2024 was like, what the fuck was 2024, but how beautiful is it that we're still alive and that we get to make these choices and then we get to have these conversations and like, that we get to build our lives in these ways. We're so fortunate. Yeah.
We are fortunate. I'm very fortunate to be here with you. And I think you are flourishing. 2 more questions.
Okay.
1, what's the mob?
The mob. When I decided to start my business, I said to myself, you've never done this before. Like, you need a community of people who have done this that you can lean on and ask questions and learn from them. And I called every mom I knew who had a business. A lot of them I FaceTime, and I had never met them in person. And I'm just like FaceTiming these people being like, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? And now they're some of my closest friends. They're some of my clients. We meet monthly here, Southern New Hampshire, Seacoast area for breakfast. There's, I think, like 30 of us. Not all of us can make it every month, like 5 to 10 maybe. And we come together. We have our like little, like, what's going on in life. We talk about the challenges we've had over the month, the wins that we've had, and like how we can help each other going forward, like what things that we can do for help or what things we need that maybe somebody could help us with. And at the beginning, I was like, these people are just coming out because they feel bad or they know I'm just doing this thing.
Yeah.
And it's really, limiting beliefs again, like I'm not important. And yet this is our 3rd year, just like this past February. So going into our 4th year doing this. And some people say it's like the most important day of their month that they have community. Because outside of my group, like my coaching and the work that I do, which is a community in and of itself, like there's not any other community I know of in the area that's catered towards moms.
Right.
And business owners.
Yeah. And also for you specifically, you work virtually with your clients.
Exactly.
So they're getting out in person.
Yes. Which is something I love and crave.
For sure.
Yeah.
How does one join the mob?
You have to know somebody, you all 5
referrals.
You all know me now. It's usually like, hey, I have this friend and, I told her about this group and I think she would love to come. Can you put her on their email list? Finally, I made a web page on my website. It's theprofitmama.com / new NHMOB, MOB. And email me or reach out. You can sign up right there to be on the email list to be like, where are we meeting next? And this is the date and time. It's super informal. January, I forgot to send out an email and I just like texted everybody being like, hey, can you meet here and here? And, we're just going to show up and do our thing. It's just a way to keep in touch and stay connected to each other in a world where, we're often separated by a screen.
That is so cool that you're doing that.
Thanks.
And I can't wait to tell other people about the mob.
Thank you.
Gabbie, thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing all of your wisdom, for sharing your story, for being you, and
Thanks.
for doing the impactful work that you are doing. We have one final question. We ask the same final question at the end of every episode every week. And I'm going to modify it a little bit for you
because I think we already answered a little bit.
No.
No? Okay.
Knowing everything you know now in hindsight about how things have turned out for you.
Yes.
What advice would you give to the 18-year-old girl who had just moved out on her own and was just trying to figure out what the next 4 years of her life would look like?
Right. It's hilarious because I've heard you ask this question on your episodes, and I was like, it's kind of like cheating. If I already know the question, I'm going to have this like answer all teed up and ready to go. And yet here I am being like, I don't have an answer. So let me think. My advice would be just keep choosing yourself. And by doing that, you will continue to help those around you. I think a lot of times we look around and we want to do the things that will help others without realizing that the work on ourselves and helping ourselves then gives us more capacity to help others. And so I think looking back, I had a lot of guilt in what I was like leaving behind or like how disconnected I might have been, putting myself through college and not being like with my family, et cetera, right? Like just a lot of guilt that I didn't need. And so I think my advice would be to just keep choosing yourself, which still inside of me as like this tiny cringe, like of being selfish. And yet I know that has always led to the most impact that I've been able to give.
That's Gabbie Kelly, the Profit Mama. To learn more about her services, just visit theprofitmama.com or follow her on Instagram @theprofitmama, the links to which are in today's show notes. Thank you for listening, and a huge thank you to the 5 inspiring women who joined the show during International Women's Month. And if any of you see me around town this week, perhaps at the Portsmouth Library, Laney and Lou, or the Live Freely Market, then please stop me and say hi. I would love to hear your story. Until then, have a great week. Live free or die.